if I were to rank who's getting fucked over, like who's getting fucked over the most, okay? At the tippy top of this list is Ukraine. Like, this is what the reason for NATO is in general. Maybe Donald Trump did listen to the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin and was like, no, we should make Russia our next Israel. They're much nicer to me. You know? That's crazy.
End to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, he claims. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. President Trump goes on, I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a Volodymyr Zelensky had earlier said President Trump was living in a bubble of Russian disinformation. Ukraine was excluded from those talks in Saudi Arabia between America and Russian officials.
5-foot Putin law? How do people respect him in his country? What do you mean, bro? He's, you know, he is a bad motherfucker. Let's be real. Also, I think Zelensky's short too, isn't he?
And here is President Zelensky speaking earlier.
Since we are talking about 4%, we have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia. We understand and we have evidence that these numbers are being discussed between America and Russia. It is unfortunate that President Trump, and with great respect for him as the leader of the American people who constantly support us, unfortunately lives in this disinformation space.
Joining me now, our correspondent Nomia Iqbal, who's in Washington, and also to Vitaly Shevchenko from BBC Monitoring, who's been following Putin's remarks. But first to Nomia. Nomia, one of my guests earlier was saying that we have to pay.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. 17 categories were exempted in Hexet by Hexet in his request, including border security operations, one-way attack drones, and missile defense. Bro, there's no way. There is no way we're actually demanding DOD cuts from cuts from avenues where there is a lot of money to be made, okay, for the military industrial complex.
Pay attention to what President Trump does rather than what he says, but there does seem to be a war of words at the moment, and certainly looking at those latest comments on his Truth Social platform. What's your analysis of what he said?
Well, yeah, I think that's not, entirely incorrect. It's what he does, not what he says. But what he says is hugely significant. Do remember he's in his last term.
Don't you think that anything that could end the killing could be done? Hundreds of thousands of deaths is insane and not worth losing land. Wait, what? No, I don't disagree with talking to Vladimir Putin on principle. I don't disagree with implementing a ceasefire at all. I have no issues with this. This is what I said the Biden administration should have done time and time again. They chose not to do so, knowing full well that they could potentially lose power and then get Donald Trump to be the responsible party for what the terms and conditions look like. Okay? I also am admitting that Donald Trump is simply optically doing something that is messed up. But technically what he is doing in terms of directly going to Russia and cutting Ukraine out of the conversation is not even remotely surprising. That was always the reality, right? Like that, the idea that Ukrainian autonomy in this process plays a significant role is a lie told by American media, this in every step of the way. That's all that it was. That's all that it ever was. Does that make sense? Italy is considering a withdrawal, apparently, with a recommendation for NATO to return to its 1997 borders. Am I wrong at this take? This is also the fault of the EU leaders only just waking up now and just being reactive. EU also dragged its feet in letting Ukraine into EU. Not that it would have stopped Putin from invading. How do you know this and still blame Russia? Because at the end of the day, Russia still invaded Ukraine and gave America an endless amount of opportunity. Okay? like, even from the perspective, even if you were thinking like, oh, I'm pro-Russia or whatever, it's still a fucking major mistake. What are you talking about? Look at the pipelines. They're blown up. Your entry point into the EU marketplace for energy is gone. America literally shut that shit down and is now forcibly selling its own natural gas to the EU, being like, hey, you can't trust these guys. You have to trust us instead. What are you talking about? 2 countries join NATO. Ultimately, it's not that significant. They're not like exactly massive militaries or whatever, but still, they had a neutrality, like a handshake neutrality agreement, and now they're a part of NATO. The neutrality is cast aside. Virtually everyone that is under the umbrella of the American, virtually every nation all around the world that is under the American security blanket now is terrified, truly terrified, okay? They're truly terrified of like global instability because they see Vladimir Putin as a spoiler, as someone who is basically ruining the bounty and the peace, seeming peace in the first world that American hegemony has brought forward. All of that is great for the United States of America. We're so far removed from the consequences, and we get to reap the rewards. OMG, you sound so brain dead. And who did that? The US blew them up. OMG, you sound so brain dead. This is just straightforward what has happened thus far. I'm not giving you speculation. I'm just explaining to you who gets to win the most in this process. Like, it might come across like a victory to many of you that are in the camp of like, fuck America unconditionally, right? That you might look at this and be like, well, Vladimir Putin actually set out to undermine American hegemony and succeeded. Okay, but at what cost? That's it. And in that process, he's brought about a wave. He's accelerated the wave of right-wing reactionaries and nationalists that have been able to take advantage of the inflationary crisis and the instability caused in this moment to gain more momentum, gain more popularity. If you think that this is good for the planet, if you think that all of this stuff is going to be good for the future of this planet, you're wrong. That's it.
In office. But look, I don't think anyone was under the illusion that things were going to be under President Trump as they were under President Biden when it comes to Ukraine. His comments are still pretty extraordinary. They're very long, but the fact that it's important to sort of first of all stress that Kyiv last held an election in 2019.
Wait, so you're not pro-Russia, Sag? Yeah, shocked to find out that I am not pro. I'm not pro Vladimir Putin.
Has been unable to stage another one since Russia's invasion in early 2022. But saying he's a dictator without elections is quite extraordinary, because I don't think that those are words he'd necessarily use about the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, I think that's something that has stood out with Donald Trump again. It was similar to his first term. He seems to criticize everyone but Putin. I mean, last week, Mr. Trump had accused President Joe Biden of starting the war in Ukraine. He wants to have this closer alignment to Russia. I think there was always an expectation that he was going to say something. He's in Miami at the moment on a business meeting, but it's...
I'm a longtime follower of yours, but I hate this take about retreating NATO troops from Eastern Europe. You do realize many of us live here, right? You Americans made us so dependent on your troops being here in the face of an imperialist Russia. You can't just fuck off now and throw us to the wolves without a plan to guarantee our safety. That should have been done a long time ago. Not now with the Russian threat looming. No, I understand that. I just don't think it's going to happen. I still don't think it's going to happen. And if it did, I would be shocked. Like, you know how we talk about, at the end of the day, you know how we talk about like, oh, Russia will never, move past the positions, or won't be able to physically move past the positions that they've already acquired in Ukrainian territory and like go into Poland or whatever. You fucking retreat troops. I don't know. That's a very different dynamic. And I match up my expectations of world powers or regional powers with what their track record looks like. If you were to say this about China, I would have a different opinion. Russia is not China. Okay? Russia has shown time and time again that it does have, just like Turkey, but Turkey does it under the auspices of NATO, so no one really fucking makes a big stink about it in the Western world. But Russia, as a foreign adversary, behaves in a similar fashion to how Turkey behaves in terms of like its own regional politics. As in, they are not shy about using hostile military incursions. Okay? Or as a regional power, they're not shy about destabilization, using, the ethnic Russian groups that already exist within these countries to say like, oh, we have a real liberatory reason for being here. We have an emancipatory reason for being here. That is certainly something that Russia is not shy about doing. So who knows? Literally, if they invaded a NATO country, it's World War III with nukes. No, I know. I'm saying, I know. I'm saying that, let's say they remove NATO presence. Let's say they disband NATO and remove NATO presence from Poland. Like, does Russia go in? I don't know. I don't know if they have the capabilities, but that's a very different dynamic at that point. I just don't think that, especially post the invasion of Ukraine, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to say, no, Russia would just handle things with economic influence. What do you mean? I don't know. Obviously not as NATO. No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Russia is not fighting NATO. No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying that they disband NATO. If they hypothetically disbanded NATO, you're mishearing the point I'm making. Obviously not currently. Why do people not hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Oh my God. Oh my God. NATO isn't disbanding. Might be. I just tuned in. No, I was talking about the hypothetical that is being presented right now by Donald Trump. I don't think that NATO is being disbanded either. I'm simply stating, what the fuck? NATO is disbanding? I just tuned in. Fuck you, Hasan.
It's not particularly helpful considering he's got his special envoy to Ukraine, Mr. Kellogg, in the country right now, holding talks.
Because you're talking roundabout, overcomplicated ways? No, I'm not. What are you talking about? It's not a roundabout or overcomplicated way. What are you talking about roundabout ways? It's fucking simple. Russia is killing, invading, and lying about killing and invading and destabilizing the whole fucking world. They literally POTUS and effectively the U.S. Yes, dude, they're invading and destabilizing and lying about it in the entire world. What are you talking about? All right, let's continue.
With Mr. Zelensky.
Yes, Keith Kellogg, who says his mission there is to listen to Ukraine's concerns. So a bit of a mismatch between that and what President Trump is saying. What sort of reaction are you getting there in the US? Probably not to these latest comments. They've only just happened. But what kind of reaction are you seeing there in the US, especially among Republican politicians, to the way President Trump is handling this?
Well, the aid that has been sent to Ukraine so far was passed by Congress, so there is bipartisan support for helping Ukraine. There will certainly be Republicans who are uneasy with what Donald Trump is saying, but in terms of them actually saying anything publicly, is probably going to be a bit of a stretch. The party is incredibly loyal to Donald Trump, even more so now. Democrats, on the other hand, of course, they very different. They have been alarmed by what Mr. Trump said in regards to blaming Mr. Zelensky for the war. Senator Chris Murphy for Connecticut, he serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. He said, I'm going to quote what he said, he accused the president of lying to the American people, of essentially rewriting history. As I mentioned, Mr. Trump last week even accused President Biden of starting the war. But I think something that is probably important to add here is that, you know, foreign policy aside, and if you add the domestic angle in, Donald Trump campaigned on the promise to end the war in Ukraine. Just recently, I spent a bit of time in Pennsylvania. It's a swing state that Donald Trump won last year. And, you know, for a lot of the voters that I spoke to, those who were for Trump, those who were against, there was some overlap in terms of Ukraine, most of them saying that they didn't think that the US should continue being involved in Ukraine. So Donald Trump, as far as he's concerned, he's delivering on a campaign promise. But of course, this reset of relations with Moscow, the concern for Ukraine and Europe is that it might come at a huge cost for Ukraine.
Why do our EU allies turn on us so quickly when we have been giving them so much money? The second we decide to stop giving our money away, dude, are you crazy? What are you talking about? What? Are you, do you believe Trump? Like, what do you mean? What do you think we've done to the EU? Dude, if I were to rank who's getting fucked over, like who's getting fucked over the most, okay? At the tippy top of this list is Ukraine. Following closely is every country in Europe, the European marketplace in general, okay? Then it's Russia. Then it's America making out like a bandit. And the only country that actually benefits the most from both Trump's actions and also everything else that's going on is China. Okay? America doesn't simply give money to other countries with no expectations. We don't give money to countries because we want to help them. Okay, the Marshall Plan wasn't simply to rebuild our allies, okay? We do that because we wanted to create this massive web of control and security cooperations with 800 military bases around the planet. And we very clearly utilized that during the Cold War. Okay? What do you think happened? Post-World War II, immediately, we just redirected all of our efforts against the real enemy, okay? And we used Nazis in the process to attack our real enemy, the USSR. The influence of communism and socialism. And after the past 3 decades of complete dominance and neoliberalism, it's basically becoming a self-inflicted wound at this point as contradictions worsen, as our parasitic owners of capital demand more and more profit year over year. It's getting to a point where it's becoming unsustainable due to the successes that America had. It's getting to the point where it's unsustainable due to the success of capitalism. Because capitalism, if left to its own devices, is inevitably going to collapse. No matter what. It was great in terms of moving America and the rest of the planet into the industrial world, okay? It was certainly an advancement in comparison to feudalism, Okay? For sure. Make no mistake. Liberalism brought a lot more social prosperity if you are inside of the countries that were able to benefit from it. Okay? Countries outside of the periphery, of course, were consistently dominated, and they rarely got to see the bounties of liberalism and whatnot. But without any sort of ideological opposition, capitalism is destined to fail. And we're here. We're there right now. And when capitalism is in crisis, as it was in, the 20s and 30s as well, fascism is seen by capital owners as a way to restore order and to make sure that we continue maintaining the pre-existing hierarchical constructs. Rich people at the top, the rest at the bottom, toiling away endlessly. A whole nothing burger will come out of this. Chill out. Yeah, look, the nothing ever happens, guys. Still hold on to this idea that it's a more annoying way of doing the Fukuyama history, the end of history memes. Okay, it's just like a modernized version of that. Things are always happening. It's just not happening to you directly. Okay, because the entire system is designed in a way that is supposed to make you feel like nothing bad ever happens to you. And in many respects, in comparison to someone living in Iraq, yeah, things are not happening to you directly.